Good morning and welcome to the Onyx Path Twitch channel. I am Travis Legg, your host, and today we are having a Q&A with Dixie Cochran. We will be talking about Exalted, and we might touch base on Chronicles of Darkness. We might touch base on the fact that she's a La Sombra with the screen flicker that I can't seem to fix, only
It's
on
a
her
flicker.
camera. So apologies to those of you who hopefully don't get like anything triggered by watching a flickery screen. If you have to look away from the screen, please do. She still has a wonderful voice that we can listen to as she's answering our questions. Dixie, let's kick this off right for the anyone who might not be aware of who you are and what you do and whatnot. You want to give us the quick rundown?
Yeah, so I am the in-house developer at Onyx Path Publishing for Chronicles of Darkness and Exalted. Chronicles of Darkness includes 11, almost 12 game lines. It'll be 12 with Deviant, I think. Sometimes I get that number mixed up, and if you ask me to list them, I will miss at least one. So there's actually a little bit of story there. So when Rose Bailey left this position, because she was kind of the overdev for like everything, like she was the lead developer. That was a lot of work for one person. I don't know how she did it for as long as she did, because sometimes we get swamped running our sections. So instead, Rich Thomas split the position into kind of three Uber positions. So you've got Eddie, who's in charge of all the Onyx Path in-house stuff, Scarredlands, Scion, Trinity, Dystopia Rising, Evolution, etc. Technically, they came from Beneath the Sea, but that's Matthew's project. That's a little both people. And also, of course, Pegmire. And then you have Matthew, who's in charge of all the World of Darkness stuff that we're doing, and he also does They Came From Beneath the Sea, and he devs some Chronicles stuff as well. It's technically under me. Like, we all kind of flip-flop in front of each other. But Rich asked me to be in charge of Chronicles of Darkness, and I was like, yeah, cool. Like, I've known Vampire the Requiem for forever. Like, I'm familiar with a lot of the game lines, maybe not all of them, but like I'm familiar with, most of them. And they all have similar mechanics. So, I was the editor on the Chronicles of Darkness 2e Blue Book too. So I'm like, I know the system. I can do this. And then he goes, and Exalted. And I was like, oh, that's the anime game I know nothing about, because that was where it was in my head, because I still had this very like first edition Exalted,
Right.
mindset. And I had never really played it. Like, you can see some of the books on my shelf now. But like, I had personally never really played it in high school because I was too busy playing Vampire.
Right.
And I wasn't ever like a huge like anime kid, and it just seemed so anime from the artwork. Now that I've gotten into it, I love it. Like, I never thought it would be one of my favorite game lines that I work on.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought like, I'll just let Eric and Vance do their thing, and I'll just poke in occasionally and run contracts. But I actually love the Exalted Slack. I love the world of Exalted. I finally got to edit something for Exalted a while back, and I'm working on Lunars right now. So
Nice.
I'm getting into the meat of it. And of course, we've done 2 Kickstarters for Exalted since I've been on. That was the other funny part, actually, is that right after I came on, it's like I came on Valentine's Day 2018. Yes. So February 14th, 2018 was my first official day. And then one of the first things that happened was they were like, so in 2 weeks, we're running the Dragon Blooded Kickstarter for Exalted, so you're going to have to be involved in that. And I was like, okay, let me go figure out what a Dragon Blooded is.
Right.
And luckily, I have an awesome team that's super willing to answer questions. Like, no question is stupid in there. Like, every now and then somebody will make an in joke from the previous edition, and I'm like, what are you talking about? And usually somebody will sit down and explain it to me. Just because there's so much lore and history. It's like trying to pick up Vampire the Masquerade in 2 weeks with
Right.
like all the meta plot and all the stuff that's gone before and everything. And it's just it's a little impossible. But I've been doing it for a year and a half now, so I feel a little bit more comfortable with it. I still don't know all the intricacies. I still haven't gotten to play, which sucks.
Well, we need
But
to
I'm
fix
gonna.
that. We have this whole Twitch channel that does actual plays. Maybe we should.
Did you just volunteer to run Exalted? Because a lot of people don't volunteer to run Exalted.
Sure. I see. This is something that the good folks at Onyx Path are starting to learn in working with me. Is I have this allergy to saying no to stuff. So sure, yeah, I'll run some Exalted.
I will not make you run Exalted if you don't want to.
No, I love the setting, and I am not familiar with 3rd edition yet. I haven't had a chance to check it out.
Well, you could kill a person with the book.
I know it's weaponizable for sure.
Beefy.
Um,
It's a beefy book.
but yeah, I would love to. I would love to check it out. We should do that. We'll find there's a quick start up now, right?
Yeah, there is a jumpstart. One of the things that we have in the works right now, which I'm sure we can talk about more later, is the player's guide too, which will provide a lot of advice for just streamlining some of the like rule selection. I know one of the biggest issues people have with Exalted is choice paralysis when it comes to charms and things.
Right.
Because there's a lot. There's a lot in the core. There's a bunch more in Dragon Blood. There's a bunch more in Lunars. You know, they're all specific to the various types of exalts. But we're trying to like just give people some advice for the way maybe we do it, like the devs when they play at home, things like that. So once that gets finished, I think it's about to go to red lines. But once that is done, that'll probably be an easy way to get people into Exalted Third a little bit. It's a little bit simpler. Like that's one thing that wasn't in the core. I wasn't around for the core, so I can't talk at all about that process. But there isn't like a storyteller advice section.
Okay.
Which there usually is in a core book, at least for Onyx Path core books and for White Wolf core books. There's often like a storyteller secret, storyteller advice section. We didn't have that, so we're kind of jokingly calling the Slack channel that we're working in Chapter 7.
Nice. Well, I mean,
like, well,
and Exalted's a pretty packed book. So I guess if this isn't too nerdy a dive for us to take for a moment, because we're in something of a similar situation in terms of development positions, in that we have both taken over a line developer job for a core book that was already out.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess if it's not too nerdy a delve, let's talk for a minute about what exactly a line developer does, because I know sometimes there are people that seem to be in the community that maybe are a little confused about what exactly role we fill.
The other thing that's interesting is that we're going to have different positions, because you're a line developer, and technically for Exalted, Eric Minton and Robert Vance are my line developers.
Okay.
I'm the in-house developer.
Gotcha. Right.
So like, I'm technically like one step up, but I defer to them constantly because they know way more about Exalted than I do.
Right. So you are to them what Eddie is to me, basically.
Yes, exactly. Gotcha. So I'm a little more involved in the Slack and some of the discussions than Eddie is, I think, with some of his projects. But that's just because it's a huge Slack to manage, and Eric and Vance both have day jobs. Right. So just being in there, like being able to do the contracts for them, being able to like offer help with art notes and things like that. But yeah, like if you want to talk a little bit about what a line dev does, and I can fill in as needed, because that's like that is what you are.
Well, that's valid. I mean, yeah, whatever. So in terms of the role that you're filling specifically, you're handling more of like the logistics management. Is that fair to say, right?
Yeah, I would say logistics management. I would also say like HR.
Okay.
If like a writer falls off the face of the earth and the devs can't reach them, they come to me and I'm the one that goes after them. Or if there is ever, I mean, Slack is so interesting because sometimes people can unknowingly start talking over each other.
Right.
And kind of not realize it's happening, or somebody might say, you know, I've got 55 people in my Exalted Slack because we have multiple books we're working on at one time.
Right.
So even though I am a bounty hunter, that's correct, Cosmic Knight.
Pretty much, yeah.
But like even though all the channels are sectioned off, the like general chat and stuff still sometimes gets a little So I'm the person that goes like, hey, maybe calm down a little bit or whatever. I don't have to do it much now. I don't know. I had heard this. I don't want to go too far into it, but I just heard some like not amazing stories about the culture on that line when I joined, and I didn't find any of them to be true.
Gotcha.
Like everybody there is great. I think they just needed somebody to come cheerlead a little bit, and that's something I'm very good at. Like I'm a fairly positive person. I worked in retail for years, so I can always like project positivity even if I'm not super feeling it. And they also, the devs who I love to death, but like Eric needed someone to occasionally go work-life balance. Don't work for a day. Go away. go play games. Because he's incredibly hardworking and he's incredibly dedicated. And that means that he works himself to death sometimes. And I'm like, Eric, I love you. Please, like, take a weekend off.
Well, and that really is a danger in this business, especially because so many people who do this do have like a day job. Sometimes two day jobs. Sometimes it's a if you're even doing this full time, you're freelancing for 5 different companies. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
very,
I still do work for Fantasy Flight and stuff. So
yeah.
I don't work for a lot of different companies, but I do a little bit of work with Burning Wheel, and I do a little bit of work with Fantasy Flight, and I'm missing one. I don't know. I work with a few other people. I don't take on as many of those jobs now, just because I can't.
Right. Time eventually becomes like it is finite.
Well, also I've tried to be really good about sticking to kind of a 9 to 5, whether it's 9 to 5, 10 to 7, whatever. Unless someone needs like a crunch time project done, I try to turn off my Slack and my Discord and all that stuff after 6 o'clock or so. Sometimes if I like sleep in or if I get a late start, I'll work late. But I try to really stick to like 40, 50 tops hours a week, and I try not to work on the weekends unless I need to catch up on something. So
it's a good habit to be in, and I think that there's a lot of people in this industry that maybe don't do that, or they don't come to that realization until some event sort of makes them come to that realization.
I am very lucky in that Eddie was already in place when I came on, and he very much has mentored me through a lot of the process. Right. And part of the stuff that he talks about is he's like, I turn off my email on the weekends. Like, I don't get notifications on my phone, nothing. And I'm like, oh, you can do that. Whereas I am often like, at dinner with friends, and like I see my email go off, and I'm like, I need to answer this later. And I'm like, no, it can wait till Monday. Nothing's important.
I'm so utterly guilty of that. I often joke about my Midwestern upbringing. Like I have a pathological inability to let a phone ring. Like I can't,
I'm Southern. I have trouble.
It's like this politeness thing. Like, no, you answer the door. Doesn't matter. You go see who's knocking. You answer the phone. You answer that text message. And I'm really trying hard to talk myself out of that because that's an etiquette that was taught in a different time. You know what I mean? Like yeah. We've really only had ubiquitous communication for about 15 years, but also just to drive yourself nuts.
Yeah. We didn't actually, I'm the queen of tangents, as anybody who listens to the podcast knows. So we didn't actually talk about what a line developer does.
No, we didn't, but that's okay.
What do you do on Scarredlands though? Like explain for people that don't know, because I think most folks kind of get it, but like there is a difference between like line dev and then like creative lead, and there's a bunch of different kind of things that
and
are all similar jobs.
And I think it's also a little bit, I get the impression, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that it's a little bit tailored to which line you're working on. Different lines have slightly different things. And I'm relatively new to the line dev position for Scarredlands. There's been one book that I've done that's out there. And that's the Blood Sea 5e, which is now in print on demand, and you should go pick up at drivethrurpg.com. But before that, I had done some development work with I did the spell cards, I did the GM screen, and then they were like, yeah, let's have a meeting, see what you think for the next couple of years we're going to do, what your ideas are. And had a couple meetings with Rich and Eddie and went over that. And so in my experience, what I'm doing is basically just kind of crafting where things are going to go over the course of the projected timeline, doing HR management to a degree where I'm working with the writers, making sure that they're getting their contracts in and signed and all that stuff. Obviously working all that through the in-house developer, which in my case is Eddie. So everything kind of rolls to Eddie, and then from Eddie to Rich.
And I mean, that's one thing that Rich likes about having the three of us, is that there are some things that don't need to roll to him.
Right.
Like he spends so much time coordinating Kickstarters and printing schedules and shipping and, trying to talk to people about their properties and like all the stuff that he does, Like him and Matt working on conventions. Like there's just a lot of behind the scenes stuff. So though he does, look at everything at some point in the process, there are definitely some places where he just trusts me, Eddie, and Matthew to be like, it's good. Like
Right.
this is good work.
Right. You're kind of the buffer to, and only the things that require his immediate attention, get into
Yeah.
his immediate attention.
Like I can email him anytime, but it's very rare that I take a problem to Rich. Like often if there is a problem of any kind, whether it's a writer that's gone missing or whatever, but when I say gone missing, by the way, folks, I just mean that they quit responding to their emails and you don't know what's going on with them.
It's
I don't mean actually gone missing.
It's very rare that a writer for Onyx Path gets a bag thrown over their head and taken away somewhere. It's only happened 3 or 4 times.
I was gonna say once, twice a year tops. But no, so often if I have an issue, I can go to Eddie, and chances are that in the couple decades he's been doing this, he's had that issue.
Right, so he knows.
So half the time I can be like, how would I resolve this? And once in a while he's like, you should ask Rich. And then I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I don't want to say I don't like bothering Rich, but I don't want to take trivial things to him if they turn out to be trivial.
Well, and there's a certain I think, and this may come too from having a 9-to-5 retail or other sort of background. I did a lot of retail work. I did a lot of even just office work before I started doing this stuff full time. And there's an escalation process, and there are certain things that you do need to escalate and certain things that you don't. And I spent about 10 years working in independent film. I used to tell people all the time I was the director, producer, and often the writer on a movie. And so I would tell people all the time, don't come to me with a problem. Unless something's on fire or somebody's being hurt, you come to me with solutions. You figure out a couple suggestions before you come bother me, because I have 20 other problems to deal with.
Which is obviously the preference.
Right.
If I can go and say hey, I found this problem, but if we can just do this thing, sometimes this thing requires, asking Rich if we can throw a little bit more money at a project or something. So that's when I have to ask him, definitely. Since, he and our bookkeeper do all the money.
Right.
I can't just throw money at people without running that by them on some level.
Yeah, I can see that probably being.
Yeah. So that's usually the main thing is me just going hey, we need to hire an extra writer for this because someone turned in a draft that just didn't work. Whatever.
Right.
Is that okay? And generally it's yeah, fine, because one writer on one section on one book isn't going to break the bank.
Right.
But yeah, that's just the kind of stuff that we have to take by Rich. But generally, I talk to Rich during the Monday meeting and then maybe have a couple of emails just following up on stuff from him throughout the week. But that's about it. He'll occasionally just be hey, what's up with this thing? And I'll answer him. And they'll go, oh, okay.
Well, and I feel not necessarily because of Scarred Lands, though also Scarred Lands, I feel I've been in a unusual amount of contact with Rich over the last month and a half, but we've been getting ready to launch this Twitch channel, so there's a lot of meetings and emails and stuff that go around that. So when there's a big project or something like that, I can see that being more,
Yeah, and I mean with Scarred Lands too, of course the stuff that we own or that we co-own with other people that can Rich is more hands-on with.
Right.
Whereas a lot of the lines that are still owned by White Wolf, it's kind of they are our approvals process, not Rich.
Right.
Scarred Lands and Trinity and Scion, Rich is the approvals process.
Right.
So that's why you're going to see him be more hands-on with those lines. It's because the buck stops with him. Whereas with all of my Chronicles of Darkness lines, World of Darkness lines, and Exalted, the buck stops with White Wolf. So.
Right. So you have to sort of go through there's a slightly different avenue there.
Yeah.
And that's something that maybe, I guess we can touch on a little bit too, that maybe there still might be some confusion regarding among folk.
There's so much confusion.
And I'll be 100% honest with you. I have worked very hard to stop using the words White Wolf ever and making it a very deliberate decision when I inject them back into my lexicon. Because it's a lot of these game lines, correct me if I'm wrong, all of these game lines, up to They Came From and Dystopia Rising, right? and Pugmire. Up to those three, everything started with at White Wolf, and some of those were purchased.
Yeah.
Split.
Yes. So Scarred Lands was originally a White Wolf thing, and then so were Trinity and Scion. When Rich split out and did the Onyx Path, he purchased Trinity and Scion as properties. So those are owned by the Onyx Path. Pugmire is owned by Pug Study, which is Eddie Webb's company.
Right.
We produced with him. It's just one of those things where like there's so many, like Ian actually a while back made a really handy flowchart.
Yes.
And I wish that I knew where it was right this second, because it tells exactly like who owns what and what's licensed and this, that. Because like Dystopia Rising Evolution, like we don't own that. We do it in partnership with Eshton Media, who does the Dystopia Rising LARP.
Right.
It is a story path game, and the story path system is something that we do own. Like it is our system.
Right.
So yeah. So the best way to do it with White Wolf is any project you see that still uses the phrase storyteller or storytelling system, that's a White Wolf property.
There you go.
Everything else is not. So like storytelling system and storyteller system, which are two different systems,
right.
are White Wolf. Story Path is us, and then Scarred Lands is also us, that just uses 5e terminology.
Right. And that I guess the question or the point that I was trying to drive at with that is those things that are still owned by White Wolf. Now, I guess, can you offer some clarification or explanation as to the levels of autonomy? Because it's my understanding, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, that these things are generated internally at Onyx Path, and then pitched to White Wolf, and then they sort of bounce back and forth at that point.
Ian showed up and linked the thing. Yay.
Thanks,
you, Ian. Trying to explain that all with my words was not working.
Yeah, it's a handy dandy visual reference.
You're not that late. Sorry, we're not that far in. We're gonna keep talking for a while.
Yeah,
it's only been half an hour.
We could talk all day.
If this was my job, just to sit around and have conversations with people, I'd be really happy.
Wouldn't it? That'd be awesome.
So essentially, White Wolf gets a few different approval stages. So they approve the pitches, and they approve the outline, and then they approve the text, and then they approve the layout. So they get 4 separate times to look at it. And all the art that is for their properties goes through them too, in like big batches.
Right.
So usually, like, Mike, our art director, will get a bunch of pieces in and put them in like a Dropbox and send them off and be like, eh. And generally what's happened over the past little bit is they go, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's great. Awesome. This is fun. Whatever. I think, with like V5 Chicago, because they are so much more involved in V5 than they are in like the Chronicles lines.
Right.
For a few things, but nothing major. Like they trust us for the most part to produce good books. We have a pretty good relationship with them. I mean, a lot of them, some of us used to work with. We're all friends with Jason Carl. We're all friends with a few different people from over there. I've hung out at conventions with all of them. So, yeah, it's a pretty easy process overall.
That's cool. And so,
like four points of checkups on us essentially.
And so, but to that end, though, it would be safe, or would it be safe to say that the origin of that content, the directions in which, say, Chronicles of Darkness, for example, are moving, tends to be more driven from the Onyx Path place, and then run through White Wolf, as opposed to White Wolf dropping dictates down at Onyx Path. Is you need to do a new, you need to make Deviant. That like Deviant was like an internally generated.
Yes, yeah, that was all internally generated. It was all thought up by our various, freelancers, devs, whatever. We're talking about all those lines and all of the source books and everything. It's all pitched to us, and then we run pitches by Rich, and then sometimes he decides, if he likes them or not. So most of the Onyx Path projects still are handled by us and Rich.
Gotcha. Now, so is that
never come down from on high and said like, you must make this book?
Right.
Like, I mean, as far as I know, that's never happened.
Okay, cool.
I've only been here for a year and a half.
Right. Within the sphere of your experience, I would never ask you to talk outside of it.
Yeah.
So I guess here's another question that, in a odd way, sort of, I guess, relates to me, because with you taking over on Exalted,
Hmm.
Obviously, when you step in and you're taking over something that's been sort of under somebody else's um, guidance for some time,
Hmm.
there's going to be some housekeeping. It's going to have to be done, and whatnot. Did you run into any particular difficulties in doing that? Any, I guess, for lack of a better term, um, either A, uh, baggage that was kind of left behind that needed to be sort of sorted out, or B, just challenges that you weren't expecting in sort of taking the reins on that, or on Chronicles of Darkness, because that was also obviously under somebody else's.
Yeah. Well, so they're very different beasts. So for Exalted, there was maybe a little bit of baggage. I'd say the culture in the Slack just needed a little bit of tweaking. Like I said, you needed somebody to come in and cheerlead. And luckily, since the Dragon Blooded Kickstarter did so well, that was the best opportunity for me to just drop in there like every day and be like, "We're doing so good, y'all! We made another $10,000. Look at us! People
Right.
love you! Like, look at this book you made!" Because Dragon Blooded was the first book that was kickstarted under the new team. So
Gotcha.
that was
Okay.
like it was a big mile marker. And I think that like that wasn't like all me. I think just the success of the Dragon Blooded Kickstarter really, really, really helped.
Right. You sort
Really
of.
kind of solidified the team and cheered them all up and everything. There have been a couple times over the past year and a half that I've had to come in and be like, we're not going to talk about that thing anymore.
Right.
But that's really about it. Eric and Vance are amazing. Like I've seen I've seen Vance's contracts for his word for his word count for various books, and it's always like Robert Vance 85K in charms, and I'm like, okay, all right. So Vance
Yeah.
writes all the charms for this book. Great. Um, we have since then trained up some more people, but writing charms for Exalted is a very special talent. You see a lot of homebrewers do it, and we actually tend to hire from the fan community
Yeah.
because that's where we find people that care about the game and that understand it. Most folks that we've hired in the past little while are folks that we know from like they. For the record, they do still follow the submission process,
Right.
but often once they submit and we hire them and everything, we find out that they're like a major person in the Exalted Discord. And I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense that we hired them, like, because they obviously care about the material. I talk about it all the time. So that's been really cool. It's just like finding the fans that are passionate and want to contribute, and especially the ones who want to contribute and are also happy to kind of like step back from homebrewing and sign their NDA and like join us
Right.
in an official capacity. So yeah, like I couldn't ask for two better people to run it, and you know, Eric is a perfectionist. He edits, like I would give him editing projects if he wasn't a lead dev on Exalted because he's a
Right.
very
If he
good.
wasn't so busy.
Yeah, but that means that I get very clean stuff. Like half the time when I get an outline from the two of them, it'll be like, so and so outline version 17. And I'm like, the one time I wrote an outline, I wrote one version of it. Like, I don't understand, but it's because they send it back and forth and they read the history. We've
Right.
talked on the podcast and other places about the research that went into, say, Beckett's Jihad Diary, where Neil and Matthew both went back and read a ton of vampire stuff from way back in the day, a bunch of like really obscure stuff, etc. And I would say that close to that amount of research goes into almost every Exalted book because we're looking back through first and second edition. We're looking in the core. We're figuring out what we can pull and what we don't want to pull and what we want to change. Because obviously you can change things from edition to edition, which is awesome. Because
Right.
sometimes you find problematic '90s content and things, and you're like, I
Sure.
don't want this.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, so I would say being in charge of Exalted and kind of shepherding it, like they had done a lot of the work already, and I just kind of showed up and was very positive, and I try to continue to be very positive. But they don't need me to intervene really all that often. Like it's very rare.
That is
And
super important, though, to have somebody, especially somebody that you perceive as being uh, your superior, right? Like the person you roll to,
Mhm.
your boss, for lack of a better word.
Right.
Um, to have somebody in that position that's in there rooting for you, that's huge. That's a huge deal. And the absence of that can really uh, degrade a team in a hurry.
Yeah,
So that's a
I worked at Sephora for 5 years now. No, 4 years. I've worked at Sephora for 4 years. I do say worked for 4 years because I still work there. So people might not even know that, but I work about one shift a week, 4 hours. I go in from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. one day a week, and I count things or I unload shipment or whatever. Because I'm on the ops crew, the operations crew, which I've been on for a couple years now. And over my years at Sephora, I had some very bad boss experiences, which is not typical for Sephora. It's a really good company that is super committed to hiring people that like live the values, and the values are things like respect for all and work-life balance. And I think that because of my training at Sephora, because my years at Sephora instilled those values in me, I've tried to bring them to this job. So when I say work-life balance and me like yelling at Eric about it, that's literally a thing that I've seen happen at Sephora.
Right.
It's like, you're working too much. Take a vacation. Go have a drink. Like, get out of here. And then things like respect for all, which is that can mean a lot of things. It can mean just not, saying anything that is super offensive, but it can also just mean not talking over people when you're throwing out ideas, or not discounting someone's ideas because they don't have the same level of education as you or whatever. So it's really like an active listening type thing. And I think that's one of the big things that I've done with that team. You asked about the other Chronicles, like about Chronicles. I think about Chronicles is that because it is split up into all the different sublines, I have a lead dev on every line. So that's a very different thing than Exalted. Like there isn't a Chronicles of Darkness Slack that has all the devs in it.
Right, because you've got
have to work together.
a dozen lines that don't.
Yeah, so I've got Megan Fitzgerald, who's a Changeling the Lost and now Mage the Awakening. I've got Eric Zawadski on Deviant that he has been doing with Dave Brickshaw. We can talk more about that later because I know people are excited. Rich just announced that it's the next Kickstarter.
Yes.
I've got Danielle Lazon on Vampire the Requiem. I've got a couple lines that aren't doing too much right now. We've got Matthew Dawkins, of course, on Mummy the Curse 2E, which is going to be really cool. Like we're doing a few 2Es right now. We've got Monica Valtinelli on Hunter 2E. So yeah, we've got a bunch of things in the works, and we've got Dark Arts 2 coming out. And yeah, so but they're all under different people, and they don't really need to communicate, aside from the fact that the rules and stuff need to work the same.
Right, which makes makes fair sense because it's all running on the same engine at the end of the day.
Right, and then for things like Contagion Chronicle, like it's nice to have people like Megan Fitzgerald, who we talk about all the time as being hyper competent on the Pathcast, because she is. Right. But it's great to have people like her, because one thing she did back in March was she wrote out a guide we didn't have, which was how to write Chronicles powers.
Right.
And it was super helpful for everybody going forward. And then on Contagion Chronicle, she came in and like fixed some stuff with the mage cosmology. Just because, it wasn't quite where it needed to be. And Mage the Awakening is probably the most complex of our games. Like, Mage just tends to be a complex game.
Right, yeah.
Not of Onyx Path's games, but of, like, the Chronicles games, just in terms of its rules.
Right.
So, yeah. So, like, all those have their own devs and their own Slacks, if they even have Slacks. I don't know if Changeling has a Slack. I've never been in it. I just let Megan do her thing. And then for like Vampire, I just let Danielle do her thing because she's very good at it and she knows it really well. I mean, she took over from Rose, who was the Requiem developer for many, many, many years, and doing a great job. So
well, yeah. and that's also a thing that you learn as you go into management. Sometimes the best approach is to just sit back and let the people that know what they're doing do their stuff.
Yeah.
Because all you're gonna do is get in the way.
Yeah, like that's why I don't have much creative direction over Exalted. Eric and Vance are both very socially aware and very cool people that know what needs to be changed from prior editions and things like that.
Right.
And they'll occasionally ask me a question. There've been a couple times when they were like, "Did we try to massage this, or did we retcon it?" And I'm like, "I think we retcon it because that's terrible." But it's 2019 terrible. It wasn't 2002 terrible.
Right.
I mean, 2002, 2001 was the era where there was a whole genre of teen movies that were about bets around sleeping with women. Like, it wasn't a great time socially.
Yeah, and it's weird to think about that. just in context of time and in context of how we culturally view things that really aren't that old,
Mhm.
right? Like how it's real easy when you look at the world around you to get mired down in, oh my god, everything is awful, but which is not wrong, not inaccurate, but in some respects we've come very far in terms of just realizing that we exist on this mud ball with other people and we
Mhm.
have to interact with them in a considerate fashion. Um,
Right.
and I think a large portion of society, sometimes I think a larger portion of society than we give ourselves credit for, are starting to really wake up to that in the last few years.
Mhm.
And it's just changed our approach to some of these things.
Yeah. Also, there. I mean, like there just are things that were acceptable as like humor in the '90s or 2000s that no one ever thought about. That
Right.
the past 5 years we're like, oh no.
Right.
I mean, I know that me and most of my friends, almost everybody I know, you like get those Facebook memory posts, and
Mm-hmm.
occasionally one will pop up from like 2010 where you're like, oh, duh, who was I even?
Yeah.
It wasn't that long ago. I mean, but you know, like
Yeah.
when I say things that happened in 2002, like I personally, I was 17 in 2002.
Right.
And I think the 17-year-old and a 34-year-old are often just vastly different anyway.
Right. You're just going to see the world through the lenses of different experiences for sure.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, totally.
I mean, I talk about, when I made movies, I did a romantic comedy that we did in like 2010, 2011. And there's bits in that thing that I just cringe at now. Like, oh my God. Not only did I write that down on a piece of paper, but then I told people to do it and I pointed cameras at it and they did it. Like, it's just everything about it's just cringe worthy. And it never came like, it never came from a place of malice or cruelty. It came from a place of ignorance and not having the experience to think things through. And I think that's one
Yeah.
of the things that's brilliant about this beautiful communication device we're talking to each other on.
Well, I mean, as the like with because of internet and because of Twitter and Tumblr and social media in general and the news cycle and whatever, the cultural zeitgeist just changes really fast now.
Right.
In a way, immediately, when I think about from like the mid '90s to the mid 2000s, nothing seemed to change that rapidly except like people started having cell phones
Right.
and like internet gaming was more of a thing. But those are like the main big changes that were affecting me at that time. I was like, oh, I discovered World of Warcraft, and also I have a cell phone now.
Right.
Then if I think of changes from the mid 2000s to the mid 2010s, like
Massive shifts.
Tumblr, Twitch, Twitter, like
Yeah.
Facebook exploding, being in constant contact with people all over the world, like once you have that, you can't really put it back in a box that easily.
Yeah, you don't get to unring those bells, and
Yeah.
that's something that, like, just working on Scarred Lands, it's something that I'm finding to be uh, an interesting series of challenges, right? Because um, one of the things that I do not want for 1 second to sacrifice the um, this is Greek mythology filtered through heavy metal magazine, with what was it? As one of the writers, Josh Deitch, said, chased with a shot of Titan's blood.
I didn't know
Like,
Josh was on that. I love Josh.
yeah, yeah, he's amazing people. I actually worked with his sister on a couple movies, but that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, I don't want to sacrifice that feel and that because that's the essence of what Scarred Lands is. But there's some stuff in there that we're going to need to look at and say, okay, how are we going to tackle this stuff? And a lot of that literally references right back into like actual Greek mythology type stuff. You know what I mean? But there's
Yeah.
problematic content in there.
Well, I mean, we had to do much the same on Scion. Like,
right.
people, Scion was kind of, lauded for its accuracy, which it is. But when stuff was just disgusting to a modern audience, we didn't put it in. Like, Zeus in Greek mythology is a serial rapist.
Right.
We didn't really feel like we needed to say that in Scion.
Right.
And
right.
like, that's something that, you know, players can choose to bring or not bring or whatever, but like we don't need to put that in. And we've run into the same problem with a few of the other gods from certain pantheons, where it's just like, just because it was, you know, part of the myth doesn't mean it needs to be part of our world. So our job, in our opinion, is making a really fun game while staying as close to the mythology as possible.
Right.
And that's something that we try really hard to do on Scion. And I mean, I say we, like that's all Neil Price, like that's his baby, and then all the other devs that are working on various projects under him as like the creative lead. Um, like he is to Scion what kind of like Ian is to Trinity, where
Right. He's kind of
you know,
the vast overseer of the.
yeah, he like develops some books, but then he talks about a lot of the other ones, like the Companion, the Bestiary, and whatever. But
Right.
like that's just sometimes you just have to make these changes, and I I fully believe that you should usually go the route of offending as few people as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's just what I try to do. Like,
Absolutely.
you know, which
And
is why we have so many writers of color on like Scion and so many people from different religions and different backgrounds, is because we needed that on Scion. We've actually been trying to get more on Exalted. So if anybody's listening, who's
for sure. And a couple things I want to touch base on about that too. Just in general, yeah, having a diverse array of creators is how you get content that is going to be sensitive to a diverse audience.
right.
You know, and that's not to say that you can't present people with challenging material, that you can't,
Right.
if they're like, you know, there's this false mindset that people have that if you're respectful to somebody else, that somehow neuters what you're doing, and it just
There's a
doesn't.
difference between writing stuff that is offensive and writing things that are horrific or shocking.
Right.
Like, we still write horror books for Chronicles and for World of Darkness and for Dystopia Rising, and there's still really gross stuff in those. One of the most terrifying things in Dystopia Rising is that when you die and you come back to life, because it's that thing you can do in Dystopia Rising, because the like grave mind can resurrect you. You lose memories and touchstones and things. So you may come back, no, and there's your wife, but you don't care about them.
Right.
That's terrifying. That's personal horror, you know? But like that's like it's the same with Changeling the Lost. Like I think a lot of people put Changeling the Lost as one of the scariest books that we make for Chronicles. Because it's so much about being kidnapped and held against your will for however long, and then you come back and you've been replaced.
Right.
Like you fundamentally changed and you can't go back to your old life, so what do you do?
Right.
And it's like most Chronicles of Darkness lines are very much about personal horror, and that doesn't have to be offensive. You can apply that to any person and it's still a scary thing.
Right.
In fact, the fiction in Changeling the Lost, I think, handles trans issues very beautifully, in addition to being a good personal horror game. So yeah, no, I'm a huge fan of Changeling, and it's terrifying, but it's not mean to anybody.
Right.
It's
And
to the players maybe who have to go through that.
for sure. And there's also, you know, I think sometimes certain segments of the audience might forget that what we put in these books is not a mandate and dictate of what you do at your table. You know, we ask. I think it's fair to say, speaking on behalf of all of Onyx Path, we ask that you be respectful to everyone else sitting at your table. But having said that, if everybody else at your table says, no, this is a thing that we're all comfortable exploring, knock yourselves out. We're not going to show up at your house and kick your door down and take your books away.
Yeah,
you know?
that's always the interesting thing is every now and then somebody will get very like, but it's not in the book, and it's like, that's fine. You can do whatever you want at your table. Like I don't care. People a lot of people like to complicate Pugmire. Pugmire uses a simplified 5e OGL, and it's, you know, it's a little easier to play as far as just rules go than 5e. And some people like crunch. And I know some people hate the term crunch versus fluff. I get it. It's fine. It's just a term that most people understand.
Right.
So like some people really want to complicate it, and Eddie's like, you do you.
Yeah, it's your
I'm not
table,
gonna
man.
come to your house. I don't care. Like if
Yeah.
you want to add in all the little wonky D&D 5e rules to make it, much more complex, have fun.
Right. It's
Enjoy the
just
world.
it's not there, and one of the things, like I wrote for Canis Minor,
Hmm.
a guideline to somebody who's used basically for 5e OGL developers to work on Pugmire. Like,
Hmm.
so if you're used to playing, and it's also useful just for players and GMs, because if you're used to working with the 5e rules, I ran through a filter and said, okay, and I talked to Eddie about it. Said, what is, what does this term equate to? How does this change? And so it's a real easy document that's up there that people can reference, to sort of help deprogram some of the reflex gut instincts you have, or help
Right.
alleviate some confusion. But having said that, I mean, the reality of the situation is these games sometimes, especially at the table, you get rules confused. I can't tell you how many times I've been, playing a Chronicles of Darkness game and a Vampire the Masquerade rule fell into my head. I mean?
Which happens to all of our writers too. Like
Right.
it's normal. Like I get drafts fairly frequently for Chronicle stuff that say like if this happens, increase the difficulty by whatever, and that's not a thing.
Right.
That's not a thing that Chronicles does. We add and subtract dice. We
Right.
don't change the difficulty, and like it happens a lot. Like it's a really common mistake to the point that the devs don't always catch it because I'll like when you're holding 3 or 4 game systems in your head at all times, you're gonna get them confused occasionally. Like I can't tell. I've worked on all the Story Path games that are out so far. I've worked on Pugmire and I've worked on all the Chronicles and stuff, and like I get them mixed up. Sometimes I don't notice that a thing is wrong.
No.
Because I've also worked on Vampire the Masquerade, and I've also worked on Story Path, and I've also worked on Exalted, and I've also worked on Fantasy Flight games, and like
Right.
I've
So
got 8,000 systems in my head,
bringing in all
and
sorts of different stuff.
sometimes I don't realize somebody has messed a thing up because I trust them to do it,
Right.
and it happens. That's what the errata process is for.
Exactly. As I was going to say, is that's why we have this beautiful errata process that you, Eddie, and Matthew detailed quite beautifully on the Pathcast a couple episodes back. So
Yeah, using the Google Forms that we're doing now is amazing because it puts it all in a spreadsheet for you. Instead of you having to go through 18 forum posts and try to figure out where people are complaining.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, with the Blood C5E is the only time I've gotten to interact with that on the development side. Mm-hmm. And holy cow, it took what could have been days worth of work and made it into literally minutes worth of work.
Yeah, no, it's great. I know that for core bucks it tends to be a lot more. Like if
sure, right.
I don't know what all y'all are working on because I'm not involved in Scarlands and I don't look at Eddie's project list all that often. Right. But like, once you do like a 300, 400 page book, that's when you do like go look at the errata and it's like 400 errata, and then you have to go through and delete all the extras and all the ones that are duplicates and all the people that are like page XX is still in there, and you're like, I know we haven't done that yet.
Right.
Thank you.
Right, but even still, you've got it in a spreadsheet. There are ways you can manipulate that data. You can sort it by what page are they referring to.
Usually the first thing I do is sort it by page, and if I see like 8 for the same page, I'm like, okay, wait, are those all the same piece of errata?
Right.
Half the time they are. So yeah.
Exactly. So if you're engaging with this as a viewer and someone who plays these games, when you see those errata links, please, by all means, pop in there, fill out those forms. Helps us make better games for you. So to that end, we've been on here for about an hour, and I know that we are. I want to make sure. I know Ian has, because Ian is awesome, has mentioned in the chat a couple times, but we've got like an hour, I think, left on the Aberrant Kickstarter, right?
Yeah, we're right at an hour. Yeah. I think it ends at 1.
So holy cow! Confirm that. Head over there and back Aberrant if you have it yet.
Or actually, I think we have about 2 hours still because it ends at 2 p.m.
Does it?
So we actually have 2 full hours. We're at 123K. If
Excellent.
we hit 125, that's one more stretch goal. So I'm
Yeah,
hoping we can do that in the next couple of hours.
that would be awesome. Get
That's awesome.
that Duke Rollo stuff. I loved the first edition Aberrant's Fear and Loathing book. I thought it was amazing. So I would love to see more
I
of that.
actually got like, and this isn't an aberrant thing, but a while back I was at a game store and I bought a bunch of like random aberrant like.
Oh yeah, all of those are beautiful,
Yeah,
beautiful
and
stuff.
they're all in pretty much mint condition. That's also where I found what I get. I get my Trinity Storyteller screen still in shrink wrap.
Oh wow, the adventure that comes with that,
Yes,
by the way,
it's right
is
there.
probably the single adventure for any system ever that I've run the most. I've run that thing like I don't know 10 times probably.
I don't want to open it. I'm like afraid to open it. I just want to keep it all
You
pretty.
shouldn't. Just look at the adventure in PDF because it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, right.
Um,
Because like I was at a game store just going through like I always go through their old stuff. That's where I got like all my older Exalted books for reference and things. We're talking about stuff because I do better with printed books just when I'm flipping through them.
right.
So when I find stuff at my like friendly local game store, I have all this cool stuff I can reference now. Um, and that's I was going through one in like a random town in Maryland a while back and found a box that was just full of aberrant shit.
Oh
I was
wow.
like, and like we were like coming up on the Kickstarter, we'd already started talking about it. This is probably like last year or last summer. So yeah, but like it was in the works. And I was like, I gotta go through all this. It's fun. So
Grab the gold mine.
I
That's
will
awesome.
say, just because this was supposed to be an Exalted Q&A for the most part, like according to the titles, I want to talk for a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, oh yeah, I also found Ian's original aberrant art just because I ended up sitting next to them at Artist Alley in Dragon Con, one of the original artists, and he was
Oh
like, "Hey, I
sweet.
have these pieces still. Do you want them for super cheap?" And I was like, "Yes."
Of course. Yeah.
Um, so I will say I just got my copy of the Realm for
Yes.
Exalted in print. This is the first Exalted project I ever edited, which is cool. It was before I was an in-house developer.
Nice.
But also it is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful book if you want to know more about the realm and all of the different things that go on there. Some of the art is absolutely gorgeous. Actually, all the art is absolutely gorgeous. And the layout's beautiful. We got all these like beautiful like watercolor kind of pieces.
That's
And
awesome.
there's a lot of cool information in here and timelines and all kinds of things. So if you get a chance, this is out. It's on Drive Through RPG, PDF, POD. This is the I think premium hardcover because that's how I roll.
Right.
Because I like giving the company I work for money.
Okay.
But
I,
no, it's an absolutely beautiful book, and I'm really proud of it. And also, I heard rumors that the Dragon Blooded Deluxes are going out very soon. So,
oh, that's awesome.
they are very very pretty. They have their lovely leatherette covers, so they'll look nice if you have the deluxe of the regular one.
Well, there you go. And if they missed the Kickstarter for those, can they still get those at Indie Press?
At IPR, yes. IPR actually still has a couple of copies of the Exalted Third Edition core with the Orichalcum cover, which is like it had a metal plate stamped on it.
Ooh.
It's pricey, but I didn't even know if those were still around.
Right.
They have a few copies of the one I have, which is the kind of like deluxe, not ultra deluxe. And then of course you can get the core and POD on drive through as well. It has beautiful cover art. So like if you don't want to get a deluxe version, I'm not mad. And IPR will have some of the Dragon Blooded Deluxes. They may have them at Gen Con this weekend. I'm not sure, but they may have them at Gen Con this weekend, at least a couple,
Well,
which would be very cool.
if you are at Gen Con, you should definitely swing by the Indie Press Revolution booth, as well as was it Studio Two has the other
Yep.
has.
Yeah, Studio 2 has all of our in-store stuff, so that's where you're going to find like Pugmire, Scion, etc. IPR is where you're going to find deluxe versions of things. Some old out of print things sometimes. I never know what they're gonna have. If they have a picture, if sorry, not picture, if they have the Dragon Blooded Deluxe, someone take a picture of it and tweet it at me
For
because
sure.
I want to see what it looks like.
You have
Because I haven't seen one yet.
you have a mission, audience. Get a picture of that book.
Yeah.
And at the and while you're at the Indie Press Revolution table, just buy a bunch of Onyx Path stuff. It's a win-win.
Yeah, totally.
So
It means that you get to carry heavy books around all day in Indianapolis heat. It'll be great.
it'll be fun. Yeah, they give you bags for that. You get your swag bag. So let's hit the chat real quick and see if we got any any questions before we
I haven't
wrap
seen
things
anything
up.
major roll in.
Yeah.
We're talking about some Aberrant. We've got the roll folks in here just shilling our stream tonight.
Which is, yes, they should. And by the way, if you haven't,
Good job, James.
appreciated. If you haven't had the chance yet, head over to my Twitter. My handle is floating somewhere down here-ish. And there's pinned to the top of my Twitter. I believe there's a few hours left in the poll to determine what the group's mascot is going to be. And
I did find an adorable pastel dumpster fire gif, and it made me really happy.
It is in the replies, and I think the chibi dumpster fire is the leading contender right now. But if you want to see one of the other options, make sure.
Well, because it's precious.
It is precious.
It makes me so happy.
So yeah,
he looks so happy to be on fire.
He does. He's got that cute little smile. I love it. So if in the event that you get the chance and you're available, you should definitely join us here on the channel tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern.
Mm-hmm.
We're playing Aberrant. It's the session 2 of Collateral Damage, and sounds like might be a victory party for the Aberrant Kickstarter. Here's hoping that we'll have a victory party that we can celebrate unlocking that last stretch goal. So.
Yeah, and it's the second part of a two-parter, so if you have time and you haven't watched the first half, you can go catch up with that, and then just watch tonight. And as Travis said before, there may be future adventures in this world, but as of right now, it's just this two-parter. So
yeah, we'll have to see how things progress with everybody's schedules and with the audience response. So if you're watching it and you like it, make sure you're commenting. You're letting us know in the chat, letting us know in the comments if you're watching it on YouTube or in the Twitch archives. Let us know you want to see more of it. We'll make sure it happens. And I guess, is there any other things that we haven't covered or discussed that you wanted to dive into while we got you here, Dixie?
I think we're okay. We can always go deeper into some stuff in the future. I could always get some of the other guys in on the call if people want to actually do like a huge Exalted one with some pre-roll.
We should do that.
Getting like Rick on a call, and Neil and Monica Specca. Like we have so many devs, Megan obviously, that would love to answer questions. So it could be fun maybe in the future if people want to set up like an actual kind of deep dive Exalted Q&A.
Yeah, let's do that.
I'd be all for that, and I'd be all for trying to rope some folks into it.
That'd be cool. I know one of the things we're discussing. So theoretically, at Gen Con or during the Gen Con time frame, we will be rolling out the standard schedule for the channel going forward, at least for the immediate future. And I know one of the things that we're in talks about is how we're going to handle Q&As, but I feel confident in saying that there is going to be relatively regular Q&A opportunities happening on the Twitch channel. You'll also, just if you're watching this, you want to make sure you're following the channel and make sure you've hit that little notification bell, especially this weekend, because I've heard a rumor that there might be some pirate radio broadcast type stuff happening during the weekend while frustrated members of the Onyx Path team who didn't make it to Gen Con take over and do.
It has been talked about if we can get it to work. Yeah. It's very much contingent on my technology.
Yeah, we'll see it. We'll see how it shakes out. Make sure you have the notifications so you'll know if and when that happens. Dixie, it's been, as always, an awesome pleasure to have a chance to talk to you. I wish we had all day to sit here and chat, but
I got nothing until 6:45. But
you don't. But I got to figure out what we're doing tonight. I haven't even,
Wow, way to pull open the curtain on that one.
No, I actually, real funny side note as we're wrapping up, I took, because I hate feeling like I don't know what I'm doing, I took the Trinity Continuum core to my home game this weekend. I have a home game I play like once a month, and I just we're just going to strip everything away. We're going to play core characters, and we're going to run all these every type of thing and make sure I really understand how it works. So I had my training montage this weekend.
Nice.
So we can dive into some of the more procedural and social aspects of the game tonight. Should be fun. But I'm sure somebody's going to get punched through a wall because it's Aberrant.
Probably. It's called collateral damage, so you might as well.
Right, you gotta have a little bit of that happening. But yeah, if you haven't done so, please follow the channel. Please make sure that you have hit the notification bell. Follow Dixie on all of her social media. It should be it's all Dixie Cyanide pretty much everywhere, right?
Yep.
And I'm at Travis Legg pretty much everywhere. Thank you all for taking time to join us today. If you have questions, comments, complaints, or concerns, let us know. We want to make sure we're making the programming that you want to see. So until this evening at 7 p.m., we will see you soon.
I don't want to awkward wave this time. I'm just going to sit here.
I'll do the awkward waving. It's fine. Bye.